we met for a beer and I said, hey, I got this crazy idea. Will you help me? I think I visited about 150 production environments in a single year, but I really saw how important it was to build strong relationships and to understand the local market. The problem is it didn't work out as we thought after 2.5 years. And I was like, geez, I don't know anything about media, entertainment, broadcast. That was the tipping point. It's like, hey, if we win this, there's someone else that validates the idea. And so I just hit the ground running.
Welcome back to another episode of Adventures in Business. Today on the show, we're welcoming David Kaszycki. David is the co-founder and owner of Beam Dynamics based in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. In this episode, we talk about how Beam came to life and how we found this problem to solve. He also gives some really amazing advice if you're a startup, as well as shared some of his other passions outside of Beam. This is a really awesome episode. David is an amazing human being, so make sure to stick around to the end, and don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. If you're on Spotify, a 5-star review goes a long way. Enjoy my episode with David. To get started, share a little bit about your background and how you got here.
Yep. So I've always kind of had the entrepreneurial bug my entire life. My father had started a company when he was younger, and that kind of got the bug in me. So it was always just a part of me. So in high school, I was starting, car washing companies and lawn mowing companies, really anything that I could get my hands on. And went to college, really wanted to focus on entrepreneurship, and had an idea where I was actually putting LCD screens on college campuses and selling advertising to the local community. Kind of bootstrapped it. I worked for a company that had built those screens. I'm like, I know there's something here. And did that for about 2.5 years, got some partners, but we didn't raise any money. Ended up taking a leave of absence from school for about a year to try to make this thing work.
College?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So junior year, kind of took a whole year off, moved out to LA, worked with someone out there. Long story short, we kind of put all our eggs in one basket. And instead of focusing on trying to diversify and get multiple customers, we said, hey, we really want to focus on just, my college and try to win the business with them. And let's forget about the other things. The problem is it didn't work out as we thought after 2.5 years. But nonetheless, re-enrolled in school, finished up, and then kind of got back into the workforce and had always worked in like the media and entertainment space for manufacturers like LG Electronics, and then another company called the VCH Group, who I was most recently with. And always knew that there was going to be a time when I came back to start another company. It was tough having a failure when you're young, but I was like, hey, if I'm going to fail anytime, it's good in college because I can always, come back to college and finish. And that's what happened. But moving forward, you don't really have as many luxuries as you start to get a little bit older. You have a steady job and you're like, geez, if I'm going to do this, I got to make sure it's the right idea. I got to be very motivated and I got to be ready for what's to come. And so in working at those big manufacturers, I just continued to see the same problem pop up again and again. So I was on the sales side. I was selling technology products to media and entertainment companies. So everyone from, the ESPN and CNNs of the world to NBC and local broadcast stations, professional sports venues, concert venues, really anywhere they're creating content. And I was always dealing with the engineers, and they were always touching, 10,000 or more different types of technology, pieces of equipment that had to be kept in perfect working order. And, I'd always say, well, you need to stay up to date on firmware and software updates, security patches. And I would basically tell them, oh, that's great. We've got a portal. You can log in. You can access all that stuff. And then kind of look at me and laugh. And they're like, well, that's great. But you're one of 500 vendors that I actually work with. So they would have to go to 500 places to get this data.
Oh, wow.
Saw that they were using Excel spreadsheets. They didn't have a process. Like, geez, if I could just create a way that just by using the model number, I could pull in data from every manufacturer, every vendor on that product, regardless of the manufacturer, into a single place. Like, I could solve a lot of problems for these people. And so that's ultimately what we, launched is our first product. But it was really just being involved and talking to so many of these engineers. I think I visited about 150 production environments in a single year. Yeah. So I think I have the record at my company for that. But that just forced me to kind of like really understand the pain point and the problem.
Yeah. Did you grow up around entrepreneurs? And, did were your family or close people that you knew, or were they entrepreneurs as well? Is that kind of what inspired you to sort of take a stab at it?
Yeah. So my dad had a company that was actually building called ProTech that he had for about 20 years that was building technology for pharmaceutical plants and Coca-Cola factories and places like that. So it was before computers were really in the manufacturing environment. You're in a Coca-Cola factory. It's sticky. They got to spray it down at the end of the day. So it wasn't a good environment for technology to live back in the late 90s. And so he basically built a company that built ruggedized computer systems so you could actually run manufacturing facilities, whether they're outside and hot, whether it's raining, whether you're inside and it's a sticky Coca-Cola factory or a pharmaceutical plant with stuff running around. And so I had kind of followed him, throughout his career doing that, had, just always seen him and how hard he worked and be able to control, his destiny. And it was just something that was ingrained in me. And going even further back, his father, my grandfather, actually had a commercial cleaning company in New York City. So literally, my dad was on skyscrapers, 80 stories up on the Empire State Building, cleaning windows and commercial cleaning. So there's kind of always been that tradition of history, in my family. My uncles on the other side started a Christmas light company, believe it or not. So you go to big, Christmas light parks that you drive through during the holidays, and they do some of that. So there's always been these kind of pieces around me. And it was just a matter of time. I've always just had such an affinity for entrepreneurship and wanting to really change the world. And I was it was just finding the right path to do that. And when you're young, it's really difficult to find that path. Yeah. And just to be able to focus, because when you're young, you want to do a million things. And that's probably the hardest thing, is saying no and getting really focused on something.
Yeah. How did you find your way into the companies that you worked for after college? So what's your degree, and what was your journey after college?
Yep. So I had a business degree, but very focused on entrepreneurship. So kind of a, more or less a minor in entrepreneurship, and had always been had interned at companies, my dad's old company, which we can get into that later, what happened when he brought some investors that didn't move it in the right way after 20 years. But so had always kind of been in that space and interned there in high school, and then started to intern in the LG Electronics LCD space over college, and just really had an affinity for the media space and advertising. And so when I finished college, that was kind of the great place for me to be. So I actually moved up to New York City for a year. I was in Atlanta, Georgia at the time, and said, hey, I want to do the big city life. Let's give it a shot. Worked at a company that was doing a lot of technology for signs in Times Square. So all the big LED signs, a lot of professional sports venues, and, loved kind of the goal of what we were doing. But I just felt I wasn't able to put enough of myself into the product or into the vision. And so after about a year, found out New York was not my home, the old song. So ended up coming back to Atlanta. The company I'd interned with in college was doing a joint venture with LG Electronics, and said, hey, this is a perfect time. We really want to bring you down, help us with kind of marketing. I was a part of something that was a little bit new, more like a startup, even though it was a big company. Yeah. And so in that role, I actually got to travel the world and train the LG team globally on the product that we were building, because we were now partnering with them. So I think I would visit about 15 countries every single year, from, Macau and Hong Kong, China, Thailand, Singapore. So it was really interesting for me and broadened my scope, not just in, understanding of business, but also understanding of international business. But it's really about how you build relationships in those communities more than it is about, the product, and all that you sell is important. But I really saw how important it was to build strong relationships and to understand the local market. And I think that's really translated well into everything that I've done today, because when you go into an environment that's so different than your typical workspace, or the way that, Americans or potentially, Europeans do business, it's very, very different in some of these other countries. And when you start to interact with the people, you start to, see ways that you can change,
Mm-hmm.
in a positive way or things that are good, as well as, some of your shortcomings maybe and how you actually, interact and deal with customers and just soften up a little bit sometimes rather than, sell, but you actually have to understand and build that relationship, which I think is really critical, early on of understanding the importance of that.
What was your favorite place that you traveled? I mean, 15 countries. You said every year you would go to that many countries?
Yes.
So what was your
3 years.
Yeah, what was your favorite place you traveled?
I think from a city perspective, Prague, because it was very low key and that's kind of my vibe. So I liked going there.
Yeah.
But then probably the most interesting was Thailand.
Okay.
And so went to Bangkok. I'd always stay a couple days before or after. And so what would happen is one of the LG team members would usually take me around for an entire weekend. And so just show me the town, tell me about their culture.
Yeah.
So I think that was one of the most interesting things is being able to stay after.
Yeah.
I did that type of thing in Bangkok, in Tel Aviv as well, where I stayed the weekend and had, traditional family dinner with his family. So that was kind of the great part is building these relationships kind of all over the world and just seeing the culture, not just from business, but also from what do they do on the weekend and how do they treat guests? Because they, within these other cultures, I think the way that they treat guests, is very different than maybe we do in the U.S. And it's just such a caring aspect of it that sometimes we miss here.
Yeah, no doubt. A girl that I interviewed not long ago, she's the founder of Crank and Boom Ice Cream in Lexington, Kentucky, and she's from Thailand. And you can just tell that it's like another level with customer service. Like they care so much about their customers. Everybody that comes in the door, it's just different.
Yeah.
And why are we like the way we are?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Is it like we're entitled or something? What is it about America that we just suck in that regard?
Yeah. I mean, I just think it's so individualistic in the U.S. And it's just, when you go to these other countries, they're bringing you gifts and that's a part of that you just don't really think about in the U.S. And you're like, oh, I'm going to a business meeting. Let me bring them a gift from Winston Salem. Doesn't have to be anything large, but they just have that ingrained in how they work every single day.
Yeah. So you traveled 15 countries. You had a really, really good job. It sounded like probably on the company's dime on all those trips, of course. And so then you start a new company. It was a huge risk, I'm sure, at the time. You gave up a pretty good job.
So I'd moved to another company after that.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'd moved. So I was with LG for a number of years. Then, had moved into a sales role and wasn't being compensated for any of the sales that I was making because I'd started in marketing. And so, this is kind of unfortunate part of, being young in an industry is sometimes, the people that are helping you along don't actually, help you get to the next stage. And so it was one of those things where I'd been promised things. Oh, we're going to be able to compensate you and this and that. And it just never happened. So a year later, I said, I'm sitting here for a while. I love the work that I'm doing, but, I'm just not being recognized for the effort that I'm putting in. And so it was one of those things where it's I have to make a decision for myself and just move on to the next space. So went over to a software company in the industry that I knew well. It had gotten acquired recently and changed the whole, dynamics of the company. And then about a year later, I was, kind of looking for something else informally. A recruiter reached out and they said, hey, I got an interesting job. It's with this company called the VCH Group. They, have 25 companies in the media and entertainment industry. They're a manufacturer, very technology driven. And I was like, geez, I don't know anything about media, entertainment, broadcast. It was foreign to me. I kind of understood the technology, but started talking to some people and said, this seems like a really interesting opportunity. I still didn't quite have the perfect idea for what I wanted to start. And so I ended up joining this company called the VCH Group, was there about 3.5 years and had the best company culture, the best team. And so really learned how important it is to build a team and how much of affinity you can have for your job if you have the right people around you, regardless of the product, regardless of the industry. But I started to learn really, really quickly. And it was kind of like, all right, I'm in this, my career's been going, but this is my time to make a stamp. And so I just hit the ground running. Like I said, I visited about 150 or more, broadcast production facilities every given year. Always was hitting my sales number, overachieving them, and was just always on the outskirts, kind of like thinking like, what's next? There's going to be something here. There's kind of this glass ceiling within a lot of companies, depending on the role you are. And I kind of saw that. I was like, COVID hit. My partner, Ryan, and I here, we're just starting Beam kind of in the, December 2019, right before COVID. And, we met for a beer and I said, hey, I got this crazy idea. Will you help me? And he said, sure. Then COVID hit. We started working nights and weekends. My company had put me on, a 3-day work week and said, don't work the other 2 days. And, unfortunately for them, that just gave me a ton more time to start building the business.
Same pay too?
No, reduced pay.
Okay. Man, bummer. Okay.
Reduced pay, cut the commission. So some of that type of stuff was really difficult. But that was pretty common for what was going on in COVID. But it was just like, hey, this is my time to make it. While everyone was, hunkered down and, all the bad things that happened, I just tried to take my time and be able to focus on where I wanted to achieve. And so what happened is by, November of that year, we had made some progress on the business. We talked every single night from 8 p.m. to about 10 or 11 p.m., 7 days a week, all throughout COVID. That was kind of our time to work on the business. And by November, we're like, all right, I think we have something. It's starting to come together. And, my company was like, all right, we're going to start bringing people back full time. Yeah. And I knew that was the time where I had to start to make a switch.
Yeah.
So we applied for the NC Idea micro grant, which is a $10,000 grant kind of to validate.
Like the statewide startup ecosystem kind of group, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So had moved from Atlanta over COVID during the summer as the business was taking off. And then we ended up winning this micro grant kind of late November. And that was the tipping point. It's like, hey, if we win this, there's someone else that validates the idea.
Yeah.
It's not just me and my partner's money. It's actually someone else that said like, hey, we've reviewed your business plan. It looks pretty good. Let's give you some money. And so that was really the impetus for allowing me to feel comfortable going full time, diving in. And then we raised kind of our first small round of funding from 2 angel investors. And we were off to the races. Kind of December 5th, 2020 was the day that I went full time.
So you all started with your idea. You made a business plan and then you submitted it to NC Idea. Did you have to do a pitch or anything like that to win the $50,000 or whatever it is, the small grant?
Yeah. So the small grant is 10 and they have another one that's 50. That's a follow on that we ended up winning a year later. But it's a pretty intensive application process, but it really forces you to focus on the core things about your business. So while you may have a business plan, it's very well structured. So I actually would start using that as my business plan for investors. Say, hey, we just did this grant program and they've asked all the right questions. And that was really crucial helping us solidify it. But yeah, so you submit your application and you get reviewers and feedback. So even if you don't win, you get feedback on all of your questions. Like, hey, I don't understand what you mean about competition, or I don't think your team is strong enough here, or I'm a little worried about how you're going to go to market down that path. And it's a couple of rounds of these reviews. Then there's a final interview process at the end. And then you wait a couple of weeks and you find out that you win the grant.
Wow, that's cool. So you did that. Then you did, was Converge South is when you pitched to win the $50,000?
No, so Converge South was another pitch competition.
You're just winning all the competitions.
We were, yes. Winning the competitions, and then NC Idea has a $50,000 grant.
Okay, so we're up to $60,000 now that you've won.
Yes.
At this point. And then Converge South
was another $10,000.
Okay, 70.
And then we won one from Mild. So I went to Furman University and they had a pitch contest there. They're starting to build the program. So another $5,000 from that.
Nice.
And some other things. So it's been, and that's one of the hardest things about an early stage startup is getting that initial funding. So, we're now going through our next rounds of funding, but, it's easier, honestly, to raise $2 million than it is to raise $200,000.
Yeah.
You're just so much earlier. There's so few people that really understand, how to validate a business at that stage.
Yeah.
But the early investors, what we started to hear is, we're investing in you and your partner.
Right.
And that's ultimately, what we believe in. Regardless of what you do, we feel that you're going to be able to figure it out. And that was something that was, we really had to start pushing more on, because we saw that, yes, the business is good and it's great. And we loved everything we had written and thought about. But at the end of the day, these early investors are actually investing in the team or the individual. And so we actually had to start to change our pitch a little bit. While we still had the core idea and concept, it was actually more about talking about ourselves, how we had taken feedback or how we had learned something about our business and how we changed that and kind of looked at ourselves. And I think that's one of the really keys to being able to raise early stage, and I'm talking early stage, like angel funds or pre-seed, is the ability to like understand who you are and be able to pitch yourself and why someone should invest in you as an individual. Yes, the business and the metrics have to be there, but really so much of it is about who that individual is.
Did you have really good mentors on the investing side as you kind of moved along? Or did you always think you were going to get investment, or did you think, let's win this money and then bootstrap it and then go get some sales and then reinvest it?
Yeah, of course, that's the goal, but nothing ever goes to plan.
Right.
So my partner and I, we put money in ourselves and we built a little mobile app before we won the grant, and just to test the market. Hey, can we do this? We talked to some customers, there's some interest, but when we got into it, we started to see, okay, like I don't have a coding background. My partner, he's a mechanical engineer by trade, but has kind of the business mind and worked in sales engineering, but we're still not developers and coders. So we knew we were going to have to get someone to build that for us.
Yeah.
So we knew that there was going to be a financial element to it. So I think every time you always think, oh, this little bit of money, we're going to get there, we're going to get to revenue and do it. But there's just so many things that start to come in. And we really started to see, okay, to make this business successful, we've got to do it 100%. And we knew that we needed to raise money to be able to do it 100% to get the right team and people. We joined Winston Starts at the beginning of 2021, which has been a great program. They have about 70 mentors and advisors from all different domains, from financial to marketing, sales, traditional business and strategy. And so they actually helped us in their very early stages put together everything that we needed to go and raise from investors, as well as helping evaluate how much do you need and how much do you need at this point. Because I think early on we said, if we could raise, $5 million, the world is ours, right? You think I'm going to raise $5 million and I'm going to be this, hot shot in Silicon Valley. And there are some stories like that, but that's not usually the case. And I think the other thing is, if we had raised a big amount of money like that, we honestly wouldn't have known what to do with it. We would have probably wasted a lot of it.
Yeah.
So I think the fact that you have to be nimble and a little bit, bootstrappy, or you're taking on less, forces you really to apply the money in the right way and to do the right types of tests.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what they helped us understand is, we don't raise on we're getting to here and, we're going to be $1 billion company. We actually raise on milestones. So, our first little raise, hey, we're going to do this. We're going to build an MVP product and we're going to get 10 customers, using it for free just to see if they want it. Next raise was all about getting our first paying customer. Hey, we're going to solidify the product. We're going to get to our first, sold customer. Like that's the goal. And so we've kind of continued to do this as we, go through different funding rounds, is hitting these milestones. Our current milestone is to get us to, a break-even point. So that's what this current raise that we're about finished with is getting us to a break-even point with the business, or getting us to, to profitability, which gives us a lot more options. But we've always had this mantra of, here's this amount of money that we are entrusted with from the investors. And, we need to provide a return, but we need to be very clear to them and us what the goal is. So we don't say, hey, you're going to give us this money, we're going to go make 20 million, because that's probably not reality.
Yeah.
It's really where are we going to get to with this amount.
Right. How big do you guys want to get?
It's to be determined. So the way that we look at it is we want to keep our opportunities and options open. And that's always what we've done throughout our raises. We definitely have a great business within the media and entertainment space. We see that we can grow very large and we can provide a tool to these companies that really helps them run their operations better, ultimately saving these companies a lot of time and money and energy, as well as helping manufacturers and how they get products to customers and understand about them. So we see something very strong here. But as we start to move forward, we're seeing that the technology that we're building has applicability in other markets.
Yeah.
So places like healthcare where they have lots of technology, we have an ability to help them manage that technology, or construction sites. So we are hyper-focused on our core market and proving ourselves there. But our belief is that if we can prove ourselves there, we have the ability to replicate it in other places.
Mm-hmm.
And so, 2-3 years from now, we're going to come to an inflection point where I think, hey, we've set ourselves as a good standard here. Where do we want this business to go?
Mm-hmm.
And how are we going to get there? Are we going to take bank funding? Are we going to have to go raise from a traditional VC? Do we want to keep bootstrapping it ourselves and keep it in this market? And it's tough, right? Because when you take on that money, it's more risk. It's, okay, maybe you're successful here, but you could easily move to another domain, and all that success you had is just, is lost, and the money is squandered.
Right. Yeah. So how many investors do you have now? You've got angel investors, right?
Correct. We have angel investors and some small funds, so we haven't raised from a traditional VC yet. We did have some term sheets from them, but it was actually taking on too much money for us.
Mm-hmm.
So they have kind of a minimum amount they want to give you. And we said, hey, this is great. I know what I could do with about half the money. I've got a clear plan of how I can apply that. But this bigger amount, I don't yet know that I can actually effectively utilize that money. And it was, you give up more equity, all that. So we actually took a smaller raise. But as of today, I think between angel investors and small funds, we probably have about 15 to 20 different investors. So that's been, another part of it is working with them and understanding things. And, as we recently transitioned from an LLC to a C Corp because that was kind of necessary. And with that, there was a lot of communication with investors, the understanding why. So I think as we start to grow as a company, we start to see it, we're obviously not the only stakeholders, but it's actually the investor group. It's now our customers and employees. And so when you make decisions, it's not just, it's me and my partner and what do we want to do? And this is the decision. It's actually, there's a lot more stakeholders that need to be consulted and communicated to and have an understanding of what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Yeah. Do you give a lot of touch points to the investors like weekly, or do you do that monthly? Or
it's usually monthly.
Okay.
So we usually send, roughly a monthly update to them. But we do have investors that check in more often. But I also use my investor pool to help us progress the business, whether that's through introductions, whether that's prepping for a big meeting. So we had a big meeting with a large broadcast group that was in the, working with the CIO, the CISO, the CTO, kind of all the main players are right there in the room with us. And we really needed to be solid on our pitch and how we talk to the C-level organization of a public company versus a smaller group. And so we actually had some investors come in and kind of play almost like a mock pitch to them and ask us the question. So we've leaned on them for those types of things. And that's been an important component. And we've had some industry investors as well, and they've helped us make more inroads to the industry and just understand, how do we go to market within this industry? How do we deliver a product? How do we talk about ourselves?
And with all these investors, have you and Ryan been able to keep control?
Yes.
In the majority equity?
Yes, as of now.
Yeah. I was going to say, how does that work? At what point? And I guess it depends on what your evaluation is or whatever and how much the investors are coming in on. But how does the dilution of equity work?
Yeah. So
it's for some reason to me, it's complicated.
Yeah. So there's 3 core ways that people are raising money. We've only done 2 of the options. So one is called, you can do just your traditional equity investment, right? So someone gives you money, you trade them equity. This is what VCs are typically doing, and they value your company at a particular price point. The other 2 options is actually for typically earlier stage companies. They call it either a convertible note or a SAFE.
Right.
So SAFE means simple agreement for equity. And so what it basically does, and the convertible note similar, is basically say, hey, we don't know how much we're worth right now. We're probably too small to know, but you're going to invest money, and the max you would pay for your shares is X. So let's say we do a SAFE and we say our valuation cap is 10 million. So we're basically saying, hey, we're raising some money. The most you're ever going to pay for a share is, at a $10 million price point. even if we go raise at 30 million 3 years from now. Mm-hmm. So it's a way to give the kind of earlier stage investor or the angel investor the opportunity for large upside with also not discounting the founder's ability to retain the equity.
Okay.
So it plays well if we raise above, right? Because they're getting a lot extra on it and it's a lot simpler. It's a 1-page, 2-page or couple-page document. So there's a heck of a lot less paperwork to do. And it's kind of like, hey, in the future, you're going to get equity, but you're giving me money now. Mm-hmm. The flip side of that is that if, let's say we do that at 10 million and we don't hit our numbers, we have to go raise again. And now we only get a $7 million valuation. Mm-hmm. So that investor is going to basically get more equity than they thought because now that money they put in is being converted at a $7 million valuation rather than a 10 million.
Gotcha.
So it's it's an interesting way. If you're getting equity, you're getting equity. So whether you raise it the 10 or 7 million after, it's like your equity was set in stone at the beginning. Whereas with these safes and convertible notes, it's really set after. Mm-hmm. But there's some advantages for both founders and for investors. It's just a lot simpler and able to get started. And it gives you more flexibility on kind of the outcomes.
And so when you started, you and Ryan were like 50-50. He was your co-founder.
Correct.
And once you started getting investors, you retained the 50%, you and him. So 25-25, I assume, or something like that? Or
yes. So we slowly gave up more and more, from 10% to 12% to 15%.
Yeah.
So we still retain a majority. But as you start to grow, the majority doesn't matter as much because investors start to have investor rights.
Yeah.
So they're able to vote on certain things that even, Ryan and I may not have the final say on.
Gotcha. Is that hard for you all?
It hasn't been yet, and that's why maintaining a good relationship with your investors is really critical so that they understand what your vision is and where you're going. And so that's where it becomes more and more critical to make sure that we're very aligned with our investors.
Yeah. Man, that seems like a lot. And so how did you end up in Winston?
So my wife is originally from Winston. COVID happened. Okay. My partner and I, Ryan, were working on the business and he was in Winston Salem. His wife had recently, they'd moved here together because she had just gotten a new job at Wake Forest Medicine. And that's kind of how we got reconnected and started talking about Beam way back in 2019. And so COVID hits, we're kind of sitting in Atlanta in the summer. We're like, okay, we like it. It's, we don't know if we're going to be here long term. And maybe we want to try a small city and see what that's like. I grew up in Atlanta, so it was like hard to leave a bigger city. And so we said, all right, we're going to move in with our parents. We'll do it for a couple months. If it sucks, we can come back. And we just kind of fell in love with it. So we moved up, I think it was July 4th, was actually the day that we moved up here of 2020. And it just really started to accelerate the business a lot because we could work in person. We could, communicate closer. We got really connected to Winston Starts and Flywheel and, Greater Winston-Salem Inc. now has a big startup push. And so I think all of these things like the startup community really brought us in and made us feel a part of the community. Mm-hmm. Where in Atlanta it was a lot harder to get connected. And so that's been a huge reason that we've stayed in Winston and a huge reason that we are very focused on building a very large, strong business that's based in Winston-Salem. We do have team members that are all over the globe. I think we have team members in 9 countries right now.
Oh, wow.
So it's really great to have that diversity of a team, but it also shows that you can build a very strong company from just about anywhere. We definitely want to continue growing the team here locally, but it still gives us options that, you don't have to be in a big city to build a big company. And I think that's what we're trying to prove here in Winston.
Yeah. It's a great place to build a business, it seems. And I think across, maybe it's like in the top 5 or 10 for cost of living.
Yes.
In Winston across the country. So, it's a great place to live and raise kids.
Yep. There's no traffic. I've coined it the 10-minute town because everything is about 10 minutes away.
Yeah.
So it's just been unbelievable to be able to, work hard, but not have to worry about traffic, be able to get out to the mountains in 45 minutes if you want, be able to kind of just get out in the community. And the community's been so welcoming as well. That was one of my worries. Mm-hmm. My wife is from here, so she had some friends. But when I was moving, I was like, this is going to be tough, right? It's, guys are traditionally maybe not the best at building, friendships, and especially during COVID, where you're not meeting as many people, but the community just instantly took us in. Part of that was the startup community here, but I think just in general, every activity we got involved in here really became, a core area for us to grow and dig deeper. And so I think our life is just, expanded by being in Winston, just because we've given up a lot of the, some of the challenges or harder things that come with living in a big city. I mean, there's obviously advantages, but I think we've really leaned into everything that Winston has, and we're not looking back.
Yeah, and all the startup organizations that you mentioned, I mean, everybody's hungry for like a good idea, and they're going to do everything that they can to make sure your idea gets put into action. And they're going to provide all the support that you need, which is great. And I come from like rural Appalachia, so it's like a lot different for me to be in this like vibrant startup community, and it's pretty awesome, really.
It's a lot of fun. I mean, the community has been great. So Winston Starts is obviously where we are today.
We're actually in Winston Starts right now.
Yes. So they've got 2 floors, it's great. So typically the lower floor is for earlier stage companies or people that have less employees here. And then the 5th floor is larger companies, more dedicated offices. As I mentioned before, there's a huge swath of mentors. But one of the best parts about being here is actually communicating and working with other founders and just having the time to talk to them, because maybe they're a year ahead of me or they're a year behind me in our startup journey. And so it's fun to be able to, share stories and to help make introductions and to say, hey, this is how I pitch someone, or this is how I'd approach this problem. And it's an interesting way where kind of as you start to grow, you start to mentor down. And that's a really exciting and fun aspect that I think is one of the most enjoyable things of being in a community like this. And then now that we have, the Whisper Fund, which is a new fund here in Winston-Salem, and that's been WSPR, Winston-Salem Partners Roundtable. That's Whisper for those that don't know. But that's been a great source of early stage funding for companies. So it's helped us. They've participated in several of our recent funding rounds, as well as other startups in the community. So that was something that was really lacking in Winston. It was angel investors, but there wasn't kind of, here's where I can go, if I don't really have any connections, and still pitch my business. And so that's been a huge advantage as well for the community.
Okay. So where are you at with Beam right now?
So we are in the growth stage.
Okay.
So we have, large paying customers now. We've got customers both in the United States as well as getting into Latin America. So we signed our largest contract to date several weeks ago with TV Azteca. Nice. So they're the second biggest TV station group in Mexico, as well as getting customers in Brazil. So we're starting to see some diversification outside of the U.S., which is nice. And right now we've been very strong on our development team. So we have about 20 full-time developers, but from the sales and marketing aspect, we're pretty junior in that. We've been very focused on building a great product and technology and making sure it can sell. And we're now at the point where all right, the technology is there, our go-to-market motion is there. Now we want to start building that sales team, that marketing team, and customer success. And so that's really the next evolution. Yeah. So we're currently bringing on team members to help us in those roles and really looking for how do we apply our technology to our core market and build a team that can, kind of sell the vision and talk about what we've built and what we're building for the industry. So that's kind of the next stage of us, is really getting hyper-focused on that. And then the other thing from my side is, as a founder and in an early stage company, it's typically all on you in the early stages, right? You feel like you are the glue that has to hold everything together. You've got to have your say in every decision. And as we start to get bigger, I can't do that anymore. I need to have my finger on the pulse, but I can't be in every product meeting, every finance meeting, every, customer meeting. And that's hard to give that up. But my biggest thing now is building the structure and the team that can do that. And part of that is being better at training the team and kind of helping them understand what the vision is, because when you're the only one focused on it, I got the vision, I can just do it. But when you're trying to translate that to others, you have to be very clear and very concise of how that is. So that's one thing, as well as understanding now that I'm maybe not involved in everything, how do I stay involved enough? What are the data points that I need to make quick decisions? So, setting up team KPIs and objectives, all of that boring traditional corporate stuff, now I'm starting to see, okay, there's a reason why. Like, my goal now is to deploy, the right team members, the right resources, the right capital to where we need it and where the problems are. But since I can't be involved every single day, everywhere, I need to now have a way to kind of have a better understanding of like, what's the state of the business today? Where do I put my time? Is it this week or this month is on sales because we're not hitting it there? Is it product because we've had a product issue? Is it finance because we're going through a fundraise? And I think that's the next evolution for me personally, is really getting us to a state where, we can make quick decisions based on data rather than just on, hey, we're all going in one direction. Let's hope it's the right thing. Now really making sure we're all moving towards one singular goal.
Yeah. And you mentioned you have customers in like Mexico and like other countries. How did you get customers in those countries? Was that like an outbound deal, or was that like something that came inbound? Like, what's the...
Yeah, so this one was outbound. We, in the state of Beam, the stars have just aligned. The right people tend to show up at the right time. That's from, Ryan, my partner, to our CTO, Axel, who had a development firm doing stuff, to this gentleman who's down in Latin America. He was the former president of Sony Latin America. He'd recently retired, and one of our investors said, hey, this is a great person. You should get connected to him. And so we had an initial conversation. He said, I love the product. This is really interesting. This is a problem I've seen. Let me make some introductions to people down in Latin America. And so he's, been in the business for 30, 40 plus years, has unbelievable relationships, and it's a very relationship driven business down in Latin America, much more than it is even in the United States. And so he was able to make a single call, and we have a demo, or we have an introduction to some of the top people at all of these, large broadcast and production companies in the Latin American market. So it was really through him that got us in the door there. We are in active pilots with a number of other very large production companies down in that area, and we'll have more contracts coming soon. But I think that was a huge thing that we would have never been able to break in that market that way. But because we have someone that's trusted and respected, they inherently trust and respect Beam. And now that we kind of have some marquee customers coming through in that area, I think we're going to see a pretty big wave of growth within the Latin American market. We even hired our first full-time implementation specialist. We were kind of doing it all over the space, but we actually chose someone that's based in Mexico so that they can service both our Spanish-speaking clientele as well as, the English-speaking. So that was kind of interesting that our first hire was actually to support that community, because
that's cool.
It's such a important part of our business today, and we really wanted to get it right.
Yeah. I love that you all stayed in North Carolina, because you could have very, very easily just like moved your business to LA or something to be around bigger production companies.
Yes. And people do say that, oh, you should move and you should do it, but
no, you should.
I think, no, we're not planning on it. But exactly. I think they want, you can hop on a flight. I think the world of Zoom and Google Meet and all that has changed everything. So I remember, before it was like just getting someone on a phone call was a lot, or getting someone on a group phone call. And now it's like, you just assume that you're on a video meeting. It's changed. So I think being able to get connected, there is always that, you got to have that in-person touch, but I don't think you have to be like in there every single day, like maybe you did, 5 years ago.
And location should not be a barrier to any idea to pursue your dreams. Like, location is not a barrier anymore.
Exactly. And that's kind of what we're trying to prove out with Beam. It is difficult to build a remote team and build that culture, but we've really taken a strong effort to be able to make sure that our team globally feels welcome, to make sure that everyone knows everyone else on the team, and to be able to have activities that help foster that engagement and, what the company goal is and what the vision is. And it's amazing because, it's great within the United States, but in these other countries, we have team members just seeing that they have never had that type of respect by companies. We did a employee engagement survey. We said, hey, what's, what does everyone feel about the business? Do you know our vision, our goals? And it was astounding, the positive reception we had about all different areas of the business. And I think that's pretty unique. And a lot of them said, hey, I've worked for other companies and like, I feel welcome. I feel appreciated. I feel respected. And that's one of the things we really, pride ourselves on is that, we've been able to start to develop that culture as an international company.
Yeah, which is something you learned in your travels. So
yes,
very important to go out and see the world.
Exactly.
So you can solve bigger problems.
Exactly.
And treat people the way they should be treated.
Yes, yes.
So let's talk more about the specifics of Beam. All right, I'm a production company. I have all this equipment. You're going to come in and solve my problem with all of my assets and talk to me about, what Beam is going to do to help me and what the onboarding process might look like.
Yep. So in one sentence, Beam helps you increase your ROI, return on investment of all of the technology you own. So we do that in a couple ways. We really help teams better own, operate, and maintain their technology estate. So ownership is typically the financial side, understanding its current value, its depreciation, and kind of what the potential risks of failure are as it starts to age. The operation point is we help teams better schedule and move their equipment around and actually operate it. So we provide data and information that helps people that are actually running around and using the equipment on production sets with the tools that they need to kind of manage that day to day. And then from a maintenance perspective, we help engineers with the ticketing and understanding of what is broken, what needs to be fixed, how do we actually go about fixing it. And one of the unique things that we do is we take a customer's inventory list and we actually link it to data from thousands of different manufacturers and vendors. So using just the model number, we can take your inventory list, all your model numbers, and now we can pull in every firmware and software update, tell you all the security patches that are needed across your production environment, tell you which products are listed as end of life, out of warranty, and give you resources that if you need to create service tickets, you need to buy spare parts, it's all in one place.
Mm-hmm.
Traditionally, you had to go to hundreds of different vendors and locations to access that data. We've kind of standardized it. Similar to Amazon, you can buy a whole swath of anything and it's all organized and looks the same way. We do that, except we're not selling things. We're focused on the service and support and lifecycle data that fuels these companies.
That's so cool, man. I mean, that is like crazy. I can see how this particular type of technology could be used in other industries very easily. I'm thinking about like higher ed. There's all kinds of different technologies and things in the higher ed space, like healthcare for sure.
Yes.
Advanced manufacturing, all the machines and things that they use.
And because we know the product or the model number that they own, we can now start to look across multiple customer types and actually start to look for trends. So we can actually look at the service tickets that you have on your asset and be predictive about when a failure might happen. Mm-hmm. We can look at other users and say, oh, they updated a firmware and it caused these other systems in their workflow chain to break. So we can actually apply different types of AI solutions and large language models to actually derive better understanding and insights about their technology estate. And so that's something else that's interesting is that it's not just giving the teams a tool to do their job. It's actually creating a knowledge and an understanding about what their production environment is, how it's working, what its health is at any given moment. And it's really unique because no one's tying into all these disparate systems. Everything's very siloed today, and we're helping connect it and giving more knowledge and power back to the workers.
Okay. And what is the tiers of like pricing look like? It's a subscription model? Yeah,
so it's roughly based on the number of assets, the number of locations or sites, and the number of users.
Okay.
So pricing for someone as small as a house of worship could be $300 a month, where we go all the way up to enterprise contracts, which are multi-million-dollar annually.
Wow.
So it's pretty wide range. I would say we're most focused in kind of mid-size enterprise and enterprise. So typically people that have 10 or more physical locations. Maybe they have about 20,000 assets, and that seems to be our sweet spot. There are a lot of people that focus on kind of the smaller end, smaller productions, but we've really found that we've got a good market fit. We provide a lot of value, and ultimately we can save these companies a lot of money in kind of that enterprise space, and that's where our focus is. And we haven't seen a lot of companies really poaching at that market with our type of solution.
Okay. How much has this idea evolved over time?
The core idea has always been the same.
Okay.
So, but the way in which we apply it has changed tremendously. So as always, we know there's a problem. There's lots of stuff at these production environments. There's lots of manufacturers. They need a way to organize it. And so that concept is still the core. It's like we want to help them manage their technology, save them a lot of time and energy. The way in which we apply that has changed. So we've added functionality like a ticketing solution that we never thought we needed to add. We've added some workflow tools, so just starting to understand the customer and the business and what they need. And that's really where it started to change. So the core concept of what we wanted in Beam is still there, like the heart is still there, but the way that we apply that to different customer types is changing. I think the biggest thing is, how do we take this concept and apply it to a particular customer type for them to see the benefits that they want out of it? Yeah. So there hasn't been any major pivot. It's actually been more of a focusing on, applying this to the right people at the right time with the right tools, as opposed to, hey, we're going to sell the same thing to everyone in the world. While I would like to do that, we're actually starting to see that, different customer profiles need different tools, and we've got to support them with that, still tying back to the core.
Yeah. That's awesome. Are you all using AI in your technology right now?
We are, yes.
Yeah.
So we use it a lot in our algorithms that capture data. So we have a automated platform that basically you can type in any model number, and we can automatically go and search through millions of web pages, find that product information, and be able to collect it for you. So before, this is much more of a manual process. It had to be done, at a batch level. So let's go get as much as we can on Sony products, and we spend, months doing that. Now we don't have to do that. We can just flip a switch, and any model number and manufacturer you give us, we find the data. We have people putting in vehicles, HVAC systems, furniture, and we actually still collect data on it, kind of unbeknownst to us. Yeah. We do build a lot of algorithms ourselves that we use, but there are some critical components where we are applying AI to help us do some of the categorizations and product matching. It's not as simple as flip a switch and AI does it all for you, but it's actually helping us increase our match rates of products and the data collection processes and really speed things up. And we do foresee us continuing to add more AI into the product and potentially delivering so that's helping us build our product through AI, but also eventually turning around and giving customers an AI solution so they can kind of layer AI on top of the Beam solution.
Gotcha. I like what you said a little bit ago about listening to the customer, because I think a lot of companies get that wrong. And a lot of companies are not customer-centric focused, because like at the end of the day, our businesses exist because the customer exists. And if we're not giving them what they want and solving their problems, what are we doing?
And it's hard to be honest with yourself sometimes, because,
really,
initially it's like, I know what the customer wants and I'm going to build it. And there is some of that. Sometimes you got to, show them the future. But there's also the understanding that, hey, maybe your great idea is cool and interesting as it sounds, maybe is not in any way that this customer actually does business. So it may be cool, but it's like, hey, this is the process and I got to do this, this, and this. You're like, oh, if you just skip these 3 steps, you can get there. And they're like, I got to do these steps. And I think that's hard sometimes for, our team and our product team to be able to get to that level of understanding and to, ask customers the right questions, because it's very easy to give someone an answer. It's very hard to ask people for something that there is no clear-cut answer for. Yeah. And I think a lot of companies go and give customers an answer to a problem, but we don't even know if that's the answer that they need. And that's been a hard thing for us, is really getting into that customer discovery, because it is hard to ask the right types of questions. It takes skill. It's hard to make sure that you're not driven in the wrong direction and to be able to consolidate that data, because it's not as much as, it's not always data driven, right? It can't always be. It's very much story driven. So what is the goal you're trying to accomplish? How are you trying to accomplish it? So it's very qualitative instead of quantitative. And I think that is a real challenge for a lot of companies, especially early stage, because if you're later stage, you probably have data, you may have thousands of customers or millions of users, and it's probably easy to run tests and see, okay, does this work? Does this not work? But when you're really early stage, you don't have enough data points to run on. A data point could be, a red herring that you go and chase. So you really have to be able to balance the data points with actually the qualitative, information from customers. And then once you start to get it, I think that's the difference. Once you start to hit it, it starts to move really quick and you start to see that traction coming. So when you're on it, you're on it.
Yeah. So, entrepreneurship is not easy. Like doing this work is just not easy. And there's a lot of challenges and things that come along the way. And I'm sure you all have experienced some failure or some challenges in this journey. So what are some of those challenges that you faced, and how have you and Ryan sort of overcame them?
Yeah. So I think one challenge that we always have is just team communication. As you start to grow, having alignment on the goals and the vision is always tough. I think whether it's a founding team or kind of the initial team, making sure that there's alignment and consensus is tough, especially when you have a few voices in the room and everyone has a say in things. A lot of times there's not a single voice that can emerge to give you a clear direction. And that can result in a lot of, just not doing things in a concentric way or moving in the same direction. It's just everyone's kind of doing things or kind of moving along. And that's been a real challenge that I think we continue to work on. I think a lot of early stage companies do is just really solidifying that vision and making sure that everyone is in line with it, even if that means that you have to give up a little of what your thinking is or your thoughts are. Bringing in good advisors was a key to that. So, as we were struggling with some of these things, we brought in really strong advisors in different domains that could help us really suss that out. So it wasn't just, hey, what do we think is right? We're actually asking others that have been there and done that, how they would approach this or how they would approach this problem or how they would set up this operational strategy. So that's been one challenge that we've had that, we continue to work through. And I think it's so critical to get that right because it really is a foundation. And it's exciting to see when it starts to work because okay, we're getting it. We're moving in the same direction. We're not questioning it, just we can make decisions a lot faster. I think another big challenge is getting your, selling the right product to the right customer. So we had some early customers and all we cared about was making a sale. So, and I'm, that's my job. I'm sales. I raise money. I sell things, right? That's kind of
need to eat.
Yes. That's kind of what happens. And, the investors are always clamoring for more sales, rightly so. But I think early on, we maybe went after the wrong customer or we thought, some of the customer types, we thought, oh, this is going to be an easier sale or they have a big enough need for this. And as we started to sell them, we said, oh, their use case really isn't as powerful for the platform as we thought. And that was hard to see that we weren't getting some of the initial engagement that we may have wanted or expected. And so we failed, not just in delivering the right product to the right customer, but also in implementing the customer. So we sold them and we gave maybe a training session and said, all right, they're good to go, have fun. But we didn't realize how important it was to get them fully up to speed and integrated and take the time to make Beam a part of their day-to-day life. So those are kind of two challenges that we had. So now moving forward, what we've been doing and a much better job of is really doing a good job of the discovery, understanding what their processes are, what their tools are, and ultimately, are they going to be a good customer of Beam? And a good customer of the product today. It may not mean that these other people that maybe we didn't get the engagement we wanted aren't going to be good customers, but maybe the product we have today doesn't fit them perfectly. And so we're now getting much more narrowly focused on who our right customer profile is for the product today, and knowing that some of these other ones are expansions as we add more features. And then the second side is actually helping customers with implementing and get set up with the platform. We are, an enterprise solution. There's multiple stakeholders involved, and it's changing the way that people work day to day. And I don't think we appreciated how important it was to make each individual that was using the Beam platform to not only understand how to use it, but understand why they're using it. Because I think that's almost as important. Why is this going to help your daily life? Why should you change what you're doing? And so that's something else that, is really critical to show because the buyer is not always the user of the software. And so, I'm good at the sales pitch, but we also have to get very good at, the user pitch and why they need to use it on a daily basis. So I think those are some of the challenges that, are here that we are actively addressing and are making very strong progress towards. But with a startup, it's I'd say every 6 months there's a new challenge or a new thing.
For sure.
It just changes constantly. Like as you grow, there's different challenges we found someone a couple weeks ago that was infringing on one of our trademarks and and that's just another thing. You call your lawyer and it's more money you got to go spend to fight that or do it. So there's just always something that tends to pop up, but I think that's why having that vision and that structure helps you make quicker decisions and understand, like, okay, based on these things that are coming up, are we still moving in the direction as a team as we want? And it helps you stay focused. You say, hey, maybe that maybe we don't worry about that right now. Does that really change anything for us, or is it more of a vanity metric? So that's kind of how we, approach some of that, but it's just every day or every couple of weeks is something new comes up. And, I always say as a founder and other early stage founders, I always look at them and I'm like, geez, they don't know how much work they have ahead of them. If I would have known, I probably still would have done it, but I would have maybe gone it a little differently. But I tell them you just have to have, you just got to make it work.
Yeah.
That's it. There's no other way. There's going to be hard times. There's going to be setbacks. There's going to be challenges. You're not going to raise as much money as you want sometimes. You're not going to get that customer that you want, but you just have to say whatever it takes. Like, there is no parachute. I got to find a way. Right. And so that's kind of how we approach is like, no matter what, we're going to find a way to make it work. And as an early stage founder, you may think it's going to be perfect. And your initial vision is, hey, we're going to deploy the product exactly as I thought. You're probably not. And if you can't move and move quick enough, you're probably not going to be around long. Or if you're too stubborn, you're certainly not going to be around long.
Yeah. And if you've faced some failures and some challenges early on, as you get, further in your journey, you get to a solution a lot faster.
Yes.
So like anything that comes at you now, you're going to know exactly what to do probably to like solve that problem or who needs to be involved to get to a solution.
Yeah, I don't know if I know how to solve all the problems, but that's why building a really strong kind of group of mentors and advisors that you can call on has been important. So now, yes, I'm probably better at making decisions, but I'm continuing to grow as, I grow into the role of a CEO. But it's being able to find the right people that can help me with strategy, that can help me with kind of our sales and marketing, that can help us with our, our finance, that can help us answer HR questions. So I now have kind of a little army or an inner circle that when any of these things come up or any of these challenges, I know who to call and what to ask them. It takes a while to get to that stage because they have to know enough about the business. So when you're early, you're just telling these advisors like what your business is. You got to get them up to speed. Then you got to decide, is this an advisor that I even want to like spend time with? Like, do we mesh? Do we have the same vision?
Yeah.
And then you've got to be able to reach out to them. So it does take a while to build that group, but it's something that, you need to start early and do it often. And it's going to take a while. And, make sure you find the people that care about you and don't care about making a buck off of your business, because you do have people that come out of the woodworks and are kind of, fake advisors that, they're really not in it for you. They're in it for, their own personal gain. And that can be hard to see and find out when that happens.
Yeah. I said this in a talk this week. I was talking at a Retail Labs graduation flywheel in Concord. But I told the group there were a bunch of startups, and I said that adaptability is your secret weapon.
Yes.
I mean, there's going to be something thrown at you all the time, but and change is going to happen. You just got to be ready to adapt,
Exactly. Like I said before, like your vision can be the same. Like our what we wanted to do as Beam hasn't really changed in 3.5 years, but the way in which we get to that goal has changed tremendously.
Yeah.
And like we always are adapting. It's like what we thought was right before is changed. Like, hey, we thought this is the best customer we wanted to sell to. We're like, maybe it's not. We need to do this. Or we thought, let's go raise a big round of VC funding and do it. And then we're like, actually that, is not right for where we are or what we want to do. So absolutely, I 100% agree with that.
Yeah. It seems like you all are doing it the right way too. You started when in 2020?
Yes.
Basically when you started it. So
Correct.
you haven't really like blitz scaled, you've sort of like taking your time, making sure the product's right.
Yes.
Have a lot of customer conversations and making sure you're solving the right problems and you're raising money the right way. So it seems like you're on a really good trajectory.
Yes. We're, it's slow and steady. We continue to hit the milestones that we want to hit. And, we do hope if you look at some charts, like we're right at that inflection point, like sales are starting to increase a lot. Our customer base is increasing usage tremendously. Our contract value is going up. The time to close a sale is shrinking. So we're starting to see the points that like we're at the tipping point that we just need to get over this hump. We spend a lot of time developing the product. It's a pretty complicated product. And since it is enterprise, you can't really do it halfway. And I think also with enterprise, there's other things like security concerns and compliance and a lot of hoops you have to jump through that make it more complicated. But once you can deliver that, you become a very sticky solution. So yes, we are going methodical, but we're hoping that, in the next couple months, we're going to see, 2024 should be a very big shift for the business. And we're laying the foundation. What we kind of said this year is like, this year, get ready to run and lay all the foundation. And then next year is running.
Did you think you would be here in 3 years, or is it going the way you thought it would go? Or did you think you would be further along or not as far along?
You always think you're going to be $1 billion company in like 2 years, but no. You hope for that.
One can dream though, right?
Yeah. I think we're probably like from our last, we're probably 6 months behind where we want to be.
Okay. Which is not, half a year, that's not bad.
Yeah. So like based on our financial projections, things like that, we'd like to be 6 months ahead of where we are. But I think throughout that, we're now in a better place because we've gotten better at understanding the customer and the functionality that we need to address that particular customer. So while we are a little delayed of where we maybe planned to be about a year ago, I think we're also in a very good position that we're starting to see the metrics that we want to see and that we hope to see. And I think with a startup, it always takes longer and costs more money. So the fact that we're still alive, we've got a great group of investors, we've built an unbelievable team, we're moving a lot faster, we've got the the strategy and structure coming together. I'm really optimistic about what's going to come in the next 6 to 12 months, and 2024 really should be a breakout year for Beam.
That's great, man. And you have 15 investors plus now. What are some key things or advice you would give to a startup that has investors or thinking about investing? What are some of those key touch points you're given monthly, and what type of information are you actually giving them?
So the biggest advice that I would give as you're talking to investors, no matter what stage you're, have a goal or inflection point you're trying to get with that raise. So if you're raising $100,000, say that, and it's never going to get you revenue, don't tell the investor, oh, we're going to get to revenue. You need to be very clear. Hey, 100,000 is going to allow us to develop our product and get our first, 3 customers on board, or our first 3 trial customers. From there, we know we're going to need to raise more money, and we're probably going to need to raise this much money to get to the next inflection point. So that's always been very key and important, is making sure you have that, because it also forces you to come up with a plan, because they're going to want to see, like, how are you going to get there? If you say, oh, I want $100,000, I'm going to get to $5 million in revenue, probably not realistic unless you have an unbelievable plan, versus if you have a plan. And it's okay to not say you're going to be 5 million. It's okay to say, hey, this money's going to get to this next inflection point. And NC Idea the grant was actually a really good impetus to help us understand there, because they're like, $10,000 or $50,000, that's not going to make your business, but we want to know how this 10,000 is going to most impact you. And that's basically what they're judging you on, is kind of one of the core criteria is like, what is the impact of this grant? I think I look at it the same way as we raise money. What's the impact of raising money? And the second point would be, who can you surround yourself with from an investor standpoint? So I think early on, just talk to everyone.
Yeah.
And people will come forward that you think, or that think that, they're investing in you as an individual, and you're going to make it work.
Yeah.
So you just have to continue talking to everyone. Try to be structured, try to set up your list, but, ask everyone for an introduction, have coffee meetings, have informal things. And kind of the one thing that is probably the most important is if you ask for money, you'll get advice. If you ask for advice, you'll get money. So I would always go in, like, have a clear objective of advice or something you want to get out of it. And, a lot of times people will turn around and say, oh, so what's your funding? What's this? And I think that's a good way to approach it as well, because they see that you're asking the right questions.
Right.
And that's something that has tended to work well for us.
The best salespeople ask the right questions.
Yes, exactly.
So when you send out that monthly report or whatever to your investors, like, what type of information are you sending out to them? Is it the same every month? Like, I have these 5 things I'm sending?
It's roughly the same. So it's usually if there's some big event, like we close a big customer, we're going through a fundraise, we're making a big product update, we kind of start with that as a preamble. And then I typically will go through different parts of the business, and they may, if nothing's happening, there may not be anything there, but from revenue and sales, the financial update, kind of the team update, operations and HR types of things, and maybe what we have planned. And then typically, like, if we have any job openings or any areas we need help, we'll put that at the bottom. So I would say it's semi-structured. Some people are probably better at it than me, but in general, it's, of those kind of core areas of the business, what are the most important things that they need to hear about and understand?
Okay. Did you take the approach, like, when you were going to raise money, to send potential investors updates?
Yes, that's an important thing that you've got to do.
Yeah.
And we still do it, right? I probably have a list of now over 100 potential investors that are,
individuals or like firms?
Firms and some individuals, but now mostly firms, because that's the next stage.
Okay.
Because a lot of times
we're talking venture money now.
Correct.
Right? Okay.
And private equity. So as you start to talk to these people, like, they want to get in on who the next hot new startup is. And it takes years to develop relationships sometimes. And that's something that, for one investor we have in this current round, it took us 2 years from the first point we had an initial conversation. Like, you're too early. We don't know if the business is there. We don't know if you're going to be able to make it, and this and that. And, you come back a year later and you're providing those others. Like, all right, you're checking the boxes. You're moving in the right direction. If you guys can get the business to this point, like, we would be interested in participating. And so all of these people want to start relationships, and you got to start it early. And as long as you're making the progress, like, they're going to let you know, like, hey, you guys look like a good fit, or we're really interested, or when you get to this revenue level or this, whatever metric they care about, they're like, come back and talk to us, because this may fit our profile. Because there's a lot of investors that have different focus areas, and it just takes time to find out, it's got to be a fit for both of you guys.
Yeah. Do you understand the investor much like you understand a customer before you have conversations?
Yes. You want to understand. So I always like to ask, who was your last investment, and why did you guys make that investment? Because that's always good to understand their rationale and thinking behind it. Was it just money focused? Was it industry focused? Was it the team focused? So you can start to understand that. I always look at what other types of companies they've invested in. Are they similar to us? Are they not similar? Is there anyone from that list that could help us actually? And then just understanding how they want to work with a team. So that's something that I've always really been cognizant of asking them is, how do you become a part of our team? Some of them are very hands off and say, here's money. It's more or less yours to run.
Yeah.
Where we've had other investors that say, hey, we become a part of your company. We're going to be sitting side by side of you every step of the way. And those can both have advantages and disadvantages. So you have to weigh them out based on your company. And if you're, young and you don't have any experience and you're 2 years out of college, but you got something moving really fast, maybe you do want some more experience versus, you're in your, late 30s, early 40s, you've got some experience, and maybe, it's not worth giving up more or having someone there because, your vision could be changed tremendously because of that.
Yeah. That's great advice, man. That is so good. What are some passions that you have outside of Beam?
So
you're a well-traveled guy, so I'm sure you've got some interesting passions.
Yes. I mean, I wish I had more time and money to travel. The startup life doesn't always pay you a lot in the early stages, but that's all part of it. I think, so the biggest thing is I have a 2-year-old daughter, so that's been fun. So having a daughter while doing a startup. So, I mean, that's just unbelievable amount of joy and fun doing that. But outside of that, I think golf is the big one. I've always
That's what I'm talking about, man.
Grown up playing golf, and moving to Winston was a great place for that. We have a great club that, we're part of now and get to play, not as much as I like, but Saturday. So that's kind of my time off or just getting out there. Reading is something that I'm really big in and writing as well. I don't get to write as much as I want, but I think those are two hobbies that I've always been passionate about. I've always been on like the philosophy or psychology. So it's just been intriguing to understand like how the brain and the mind works, how people think about things and what the true mission or vision is. Not just for like a company, but also for like individuals. How do they define that themselves? So those are kind of in the core things that have always been with me throughout life. And then I think the last is just, being able to help the community has been a big part of it. In Winston, it's definitely heavily focused on kind of the startup ecosystem and trying to be involved in different aspects of it and getting to mentor people through Winston Starts, just other companies that are younger or, side by side with us. That's actually a big passion of mine and an enjoyment to be able to have that. And then in kind of another soft spot in my heart has been working with children or kids in youth detention centers.
Okay.
I just, for whatever reason, whenever I would drive by one when I was, younger or like in college, there's always like, there's something there. Like I just was called towards it. And I think that has been, one of the most rewarding parts of my life actually is being able to spend time with kids in a youth detention center because, I've seen that a lot of it is not just based on their, who they are, it's where they came from. So it's a lot of the environments that they came out of. And, I just thank, my parents and my family for having a support community because I see so many people don't. And just seeing kind of the intelligence and the brilliance that these kids have. And, some of them have done bad things. They're not there, they're there for a reason, obviously. But when you start to understand that and see, how gifted and lucky we are, but also how, little the community really cares about those types of people or supports them. And I think that was something that really just opened my eyes, helped me appreciate what I have in life, but also helped me think like, how can I give some of the gifts that I have back and help, I believe every person has more potential than they even know. And so if I do nothing else, it's helping those kids see like they have a lot of potential, whatever's happened, and trying to provide them some sort of motivation to kind of continue on, after this.
That's great. I'm sure there's like some nonprofits that focus on that specific type of group. So have you found like a nonprofit organization to align with sort of?
It's very few actually. It's just really sad.
So you're already thinking about how to solve this problem too, probably.
Yes. Yeah. It's very sad because I would go in there on a weekly basis, especially when I was down in Atlanta. And, I'd go in a week, I would sign into like the visitor log and go spend time, with in the different areas where the kids are. And sometimes there'd only be one other person ahead of me. And it was, someone from the church service that had come in to do that. And I was the only one. And it was kind of back and forth. And I'd ask the kids, does anyone else come in? Is anyone working with you? And it was kind of, no, like there's no one that comes in. And that was hard to see. I mean, there was kids that, we were told by the staff that, someone brought in a birthday cake, for one of the kids. And they said that, every single time they do that, they do it once a month for the kids. And there's, always someone that says, I've never had a birthday cake before.
Wow.
Like this is the first time I've had one. So it's just when you start to see stuff like that, you think, oh yeah, there's the business and we're trying to, build a business and make money and do all this stuff. But oftentimes we forget about, some of that type of stuff. And there's not a lot of community organizations. I think probably different parts of, the world or the country have better focuses on that. But it was just, I saw it was a real gap that people weren't really participating in. And, these kids are our future and they have an opportunity to do something great. And I think if we can support them better, making them good, members, productive members of society isn't going to happen by them staying only to themselves. If they don't have someone they can look up to and even 5, 10, 20 years later say, oh yeah, that person said one thing. And if that's all it is, that's, worth it.
Yeah. What got you going, like visiting those detention centers? Like what about it like drew you to it?
It was just like I was called to it. It's hard to explain. I just would drive by and there was just something there every time.
You were passing by it all the time.
Yes.
So you physically saw it, and then
Correct.
And you got interested in what was going on.
Correct. Went through the background checks and, fingerprinting and all the crazy, it's much more of a process than you think. And just like started to do it and said, let me try this once, and got a tour of the facility. And the woman was like, we'd love to have you. And they would love to have someone, talk to them. And it was nothing more than going in and playing games or playing cards. And just having a regular conversation with someone, starting to understand their stories. And it was eye-opening. It was like it was meant to be. And it was just one of those things where it's like every time I passed a youth detention center, there's one in Atlanta I passed, and then otherwise it was just like something was there. And I kind of said, hey, I'm just going to follow it and chase it. And if it's great, it's great. If it's not, it's not. And, that's kind of how it, evolved.
Wow, man, that is such a noble thing. So you said you were kind of looking at some of the problems I have and the gaps, and
correct,
maybe thinking about some solutions. So have you thought about starting your own nonprofit for this?
Yes, I think it's just a matter of time.
Sure.
Yeah. Right now, I'm unfortunately very focused on kind of what has to be accomplished at Beam. But yes, I think there's some small ways that, a small effort can go a long way in those types of environments. And so I think there's a lot actually more in kind of probably traditional prison systems to help people. But from what I've seen kind of in the youth detention center, there's less of that. And so I think something in there, maybe pulling on people that are doing this already in, larger systems, or for adults, could probably be applied to this as well.
How old are the kids in?
They're anywhere from, I think the youngest is 11 or 12, all the way up to, 17.
Okay.
But yeah, it's usually like 14 to 16, I would say, is kind of the average age for them.
So they're like at a critical moment in their life to be able to have a conversation to change like basically their trajectory.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's cool, man. Hopefully you find a way to solve that problem.
I hope so.
I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Yes.
Let's go back to golf, not to switch subjects so drastically here. What did you shoot the last time you played golf? I feel like you're probably a good golfer.
I played well. I think I shot 79.
Yeah. Pretty good.
Yeah.
Is that like a good round for you?
That's pretty good. If I shoot in the 70s, that's a good round for me.
Okay. You feel pretty good about shooting in the 70s. If you shoot like high 80s, you're like, I didn't play that well.
Yes. Okay. Exactly. It's usually like low 80s, high 70s is the goal.
Yeah.
It doesn't always go that way, but I played, was up at my parents' house. They live in the North Georgia mountains a couple of weeks ago, and they're in a mountain course, so it's like, if you miss one way, the ball is gone. And so I never play well. Yeah, never play well up there because it's like one small miss. But a couple of weeks ago, I was like, I figured it out and did it. So I was, pretty proud of myself.
Nice.
Was walking out with, high on my feet, I guess. I don't know what you call it.
Do you play pretty often? Like, how often do you get out there?
I try to play. I've got a group of, 4 or 5 guys, and we always get out on Saturday. So that's kind of a typical time. And so it's just, we walk the course. It's always just a good time to relax and, kind of get to cool things down a little bit because you're not thinking about family, you're not thinking about work. And I think that's important to have kind of that outlet. It's really hard, as a founder. So making sure that you have those outlets where just nothing else, even if I try to work out at the gym, it doesn't work because my phone's there or I'm thinking. But there, it's kind of like I'm away from everything.
Is that like your go-to thing for like stress relief, your mental health? Like, what are some things outside of golf you're doing for mental health, I guess?
Yeah, so that's a key component because I get to talk to friends. Another thing is I tried to do yoga, so
love that.
We got started during COVID, right? We're kind of stuck in it, and so my wife and I said, all right, we're going to do a 30-day yoga challenge. And that kind of continued. I wouldn't say do it as much as I like, but I think that's an important thing. I try to do meditation, and then writing is probably the best thing for me. It's just hard for me to get started. I used to write a lot more, but I think those are kind of the things that, journaling or writing, the kind of the things that tend to help me relieve stress. It's hard because you kind of just go, and it's really hard just to stop even for 5 minutes and, take a deep breath or understand what's going on. You just get into the work. But I honestly found out sometimes that working on a weekend, like maybe taking a little slower during the week or a Friday afternoon, but Sometimes weekend work is the most productive for me because it's the time where I don't have people calling me. I don't have emails, I don't have meetings to answer to. And so that's actually a really good time to get more of that creative work that, hey, if I don't make any progress, that's okay.
Yeah.
Because it's just a weekend, but it's a time to like tackle some of the bigger problems or the thinking things that maybe isn't a part of the day to day, but it's really important in the long term.
Yeah. What are some things that that you do at home, like outside of family? You write some. Are you into like YouTube or anything like that?
Not
Do you,
really.
like binge watch shows or anything?
Yeah, occasionally. Yeah, we're on to Suits right now, so that's kind of the current binge show. I'm not too bad on that. But yeah, I think just reading is the other big thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, cooking. So, my wife probably cooks more than she wants to because she's like, you're a better cook than me. So that would be like the other passion. So making.
I love cooking.
Yeah, so
I'm big in it.
What do you make?
All kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Like last night, I'm big into like sourdough. So I've been feeding a sourdough starter for over 3 years now.
Oh my gosh.
And I make pizza dough.
Yeah.
And so last night we had sourdough pizza. So I make bread every week, pizza every week.
That's dangerous.
Yeah, I know. But we make a lot of Mexican food too.
So I'm like Italian, so make homemade pasta, and we got one of the,
that's awesome.
uni ovens, so we've been starting to make homemade pizza. That's been a fun one. So I've gotten into the dough game, but
nice.
The sourdough as a whole, you got to be committed.
It's a process.
Yeah.
I got addicted during COVID.
Yep.
So
my brother-in-law did the same thing. He started, starting it up and still makes it to this day.
Yeah.
Same starter.
I'll have to get you some pizza dough.
Yes.
We've been looking at unis too. A couple years ago, we were going to buy one, and they were actually out of stock. I guess it was like in the early days of uni.
Oh, yeah,
it was like everybody had one.
Yes.
I guess that was like the first to market of those ovens. So yeah, we've been definitely looking at those.
Yep.
Yeah. That's great. So tell us what's next for Beam.
So next year is going to be a very big year for us, right? We're putting a lot of effort on growing really, really large with the kind of mid-sized broadcast and outside broadcast. So these are the people that are putting on, sports events and concerts and moving assets around, putting on the Olympics. So that's really where we're highly, highly focused, is getting very large within that and having a perfect product that fits all those use cases, as well as working with kind of these mid-sized production companies like the TVS Techas that have, 25 to 50 locations. We're also starting to build more like embedded products. So we're actually seeing a use case that people just want our data alone, because there's a lot of value in it. So we're actually starting to partner with other third parties that offer maybe service solutions or ticketing solutions or inventory management, and actually purely supplying our data, and then starting to layer on top of that kind of these AI and these layer of insights. So as we have kind of the foundation for everything built, now it's really expanding on that foundation, and we're able to deliver features a lot faster. So I'm excited to see kind of what transpires, some of the additional functionality that we're going to be delivering, but also just this big focus on, understanding our customer base, getting pretty large. And I think within the next year, we're going to become a kind of a key name within the industry that everyone's going to know. And we're really changing the way that people are operating. And the way that I talk about it is there's a lot of technology advancements on the edge of production, like the cameras and the microphones and all the equipment that sits on the edge. But the actual way that companies are run and operate hasn't really changed, in 20, 30 years. And so we're really focused on changing the operation of these companies, which make them more efficient, saves them money, allow them to create productions faster, as well as providing better insights and information for the manufacturers building products so they can build better products at better prices, deliver them quicker. So we see that ourselves, as being really a central player, not just to a wider customer base, but also to, third-party manufacturers and helping the industry come together.
Nice. And some final thoughts here. What is some advice you would give to an entrepreneur or startup?
Well, that's a pretty
it's a
wide question. The biggest advice I would have is, keep on going, right? You've got to find a way down a path. And the path that you go might not always be the one that you end up on. And so this kind of comes back to that grit or that persistence. But, if you really are committed, you've got to be 100% committed. People have said, oh, well, maybe I'll try it and then I can go back to my job. But if you really want to make it, you've got to be 100% in.
Mm-hmm.
You have to kind of have blinders on, no looking back, and just find a path. It still might not work out, but you can't have a safety net. You just have to say, this is what I'm pursuing. I'm putting 100% of my effort into it until I get to this position. And it's hard to do. It's hard to think that way. So that would be kind of a core piece of advice. And then the second is, with your partner as well as with your spouse or your significant other, is to have good conversation and communication with them, because it's tough being a founder. It's tough understanding, are we going to have a paycheck coming from you? When are you going to start to make some more money? When is this thing going to, take off? What are the inflection points? I think it can cause a lot of stress in your relationships, both, your significant other or your family or your friends. And a lot of times, you have to make some sacrifices in order to pursue this. And you just need to be open with everyone and understanding that, hey, this is the sacrifices I have to take. Maybe I can't go out on a Friday night because I need to work or because this is important. And, you have to be able to turn things down, but be open so others understand and respect that.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Great advice. Awesome story, by the way.
Thank you.
This is so great. Appreciate your time here.
Yeah.
And this definitely won't be our last conversation. I think we have a lot of similarities here.
Yes.
Golf.
We'll get on the course soon.
Yeah, we'll get on the course. I might not shoot 79, but I will try. But anyways, that's another edition of Adventures of Business. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.